Are going live right now. Shooting up this tweet. Okay, just checking, doing a last check. All right. Let me. Oh, and I gotta close out Chrome real quick. Cool. Okay, we look good. Hi, everyone who is joining us today. My name is Bryant Francis. I am contributing editor to Gamasutra. You cannot see me right now, but who you can see are the three wonderful people I'm joined with today. Would you please introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Chris Graft. I'm editor-in-chief of Gamasutra. We are about the art and business of making games.
Yeah.
And I'm Gamasutra editor Alex Waro, and we're joined by very special guests.
Hey, I'm Bill Gardner. I was the lead level designer on BioShock.
Sweet. I just saw your name in the credits as it rolled by, so it's really cool to get you on the call today.
Confirmed.
Yeah.
He has been officially verified.
Verified.
We actually didn't really know if Bill was telling us the truth about his
Did he actually work on
association
BioShock?
with BioShock. Yeah,
Everyone who knows me knows you shouldn't trust what I say, so that's a good.
well, he's in the credits.
He hasn't said "would you kindly" yet, so I think we're good.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Bill, what are you up to these days?
So I've been running my own company called the Deep End Games. We're creating a game right now called Perception, which is a narrative first-person horror game where you play as a blind woman who uses echolocation, and it's been developing the game for about a year and a half now. We went to Kickstarter about last summer actually, and it's really come together. Really proud of what we're doing, and a lot of people will play. We were actually at Boston Festival of Indie Games this past weekend.
That's a great show. I was there last year.
It is a great show. Like, it was my first one, and I was really amazed, really impressed with obviously the atmosphere and the excitement and enthusiasm and all that. But I mean, it's a really well put together show, and there's a lot of games. I don't know what the numbers were, but tons of games, tons of amazing talent. And we were lucky enough to win Best in Show there, as well as Best Narrative and World Building. And so we're still bouncing off the wall about it. I wish I had the trophies here. I'm gonna gloat here, but anyway, so game's
Cool.
going really well, and really excited. And one of my favorite pieces is that when people walk away from it, they say, "Hey, this it kind of feels a little BioShocky." There's no combat in it, but I think that the way the narrative and the atmosphere, the kind of feel of the mouthfeel of it is a little bit BioShock, and that's just because I spent 10 years or whatever working on the series. So
Yeah.
they actually say BioShocky.
I've been saying that this week. So before
I haven't updated my autocorrect to accept that, but I actually went to typing that a lot.
Yeah, but before we talk anymore, I'm gonna get us started. We're going to jump in, not just in game. We're going to jump in the intro because you worked on the first 3 levels of the game, correct?
I did. Yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah. Real quick to answer a question in the chat, I see Chat Pack is asking, is there chat interaction during this cast? There absolutely is. If you want to ask any questions of Bill or us, feel free to ask them in the chat. I will call them out. Bill, or if anyone else wants, and from our stream wants to jump on our Twitch page, they can also jump in and answer them as well. But we will try to answer questions from the chat during the show. I'll be looking out for them specifically, but hopefully everyone else can too. Anyway, to get back on my first point, we are going to be going through the first 3 levels. The first few levels of BioShock, because those are the ones you spent a lot of time on, right, Bill?
Yeah, it's true. So Welcome to Rapture and Medical Pavilion were the 2 levels that I probably spent the most time, along with Fort Frolic. Eventually, Jordan Thomas, the uber-talented creative director behind BioShock 2 and the Magic Circle, he eventually took over for me, I don't know, the last 8 months or so. Those are the 3 levels I spent most of my time on.
Cool. And
We're around sorry, Brian. We're around at the very, very beginning of the game's development.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's interesting because it actually had a few different I don't know if you could say false starts or whatever, but originally we were pitching it for Xbox. I almost said Xbox One for the first Xbox.
The first Xbox One.
Yes, the first Xbox One.
That was a whole different beast. It was all a lot more. It was just a completely different game. But yes, I was there from the very beginning. So
yeah,
we want to hear about that in a little bit if we have time.
Yeah, totally.
It's cool.
Totally.
And one last thing I'm going to bring up before we get started. So we're going to go through straight from the intro of the game, which I think is a really interesting, because it's one of those intros that I've had it taught in classes that I've been in. There's a lot to go through, and as we saw this week in an interview that Ken Levine did with Glixel, it came together at the last minute, didn't it? This intro for the game.
It did. Well, so there were a lot of pieces that were missing,
Yeah.
and to sort of get it right, like everyone always says, the last 10% is 90% of your work.
Yeah.
And the biggest, where you spent 90% of your time, and the biggest challenge, and all of that. And we thought we were pretty damn close to being done, and we took it to focus. Ken described it pretty well. I mean, that was pretty spot on, and we were all heartbroken at first, but we came in the next day, and we're all like, okay, how can we make this? How can we fix this? It was something that could have basically scattered the team to the four corners of the earth in extreme depression.
Yeah.
Or it could have been something that was unifying, and something that was like motivating, and that's that we chose the latter path.
Yeah. Real quick, I'm going to give a shout out to the chat. Laura3 is me. Thank you for tuning in. Glad you can hear us. Sounds like you can hear us over the game's music. Chat pack, again, we are hoping to make this. We want to talk with you guys in the chat. That's what we're here to do. Nerd Migo, thank you for coming, and we're glad you were playing BioShock. And Chat Pack, we actually did get the new collection, but we're playing the original game today just to go through specifically.
This is OG BioShock right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna play on media mode because even though I'm pretty good at BioShock, it's been a while, and we don't want to spend all day dying.
It's a good choice.
Here we go. Yeah. So. Just to get things started while we're looking at a loading screen. So I played BioShock. I came to BioShock when I was in high school because my brother was really excited about it, and he got through the game and then came to me and said, "You have to play this game. It's like nothing you've ever seen." And so I, this came to where we are today, and they told me, "Son, you're special." And
That's my ugly face right there, by the way.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
I don't know if it was. Well, anyway, so Ken at one point asked me, he was like, "Hey, do you want to pose for Jack?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so it took a couple of pictures of me and Rob Waters, the concept artist, wound up modifying them a bit, and you see my stupid face in the game a few times.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Bill. Are you telling us you're the protagonist of BioShock?
No.
Would you kindly tell us if you're the protagonist of BioShock?
We've exactly. Yeah, it's actually autobiographical.
Real quick, Halo Elite Legend will be going for about an hour. Although if we decide, if the questions are going great, we'll see how it goes. Laura 3's Me brings up that her level design class and storytelling class have gone over this game a lot. I see Rit Nelson has joined us. I recognize his handle from Twitter. Thanks for joining us. The Ohio University Game Developers Association is here. Wow.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And thanks, Carly, for joining us as always.
Is it the Ohio State University?
Yeah, like OSU. Where a lot of my cousin goes there and a lot of my friends go there.
Go State.
This is not, and again, just for everyone joining us, we are playing OG BioShock, just running on a very nice computer. We are not playing the remaster collection. Oh, right. So, first interesting thing, you aren't swimming toward the lighthouse right away.
Right.
I was going forward and was like, where the heck's the lighthouse? And then I was like, oh, right, I have to look over here.
Yeah,
did you have that
a little bit of a
come across
serpentine pattern, right?
Yeah.
Funny thing, actually, one of the most positive pieces from
Ohio University. Sorry, go ahead.
No, from the early focus testing was that some people would watch that very short intro cutscene, and then when you come up to the surface, a lot of people would actually just kind of sit there for a minute, not knowing that the cutscene was over, and we would have to go over and kind of nudge them on the shoulder and be like, "Oh, that you're playing now." And I think opens up with that gorgeous shot, and I think that was very exciting for me is to see that. We actually had to put in a little text message, a little adaptive training message to be like, move forward with the left stick.
Yeah.
Do you think that if you didn't have that it would just maybe still be there?
This is still one of my favorite moments in just games in general. This is like just having this suddenly come over you.
Yeah, it's
pretty
awesome.
Shout out to Gemstrike in the World Design class at Johnson Community College.
Cool.
Lots
of students. That's lots of colleges.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
That's cool.
What engine was this on, Bill?
This was Unreal. This is our own version of sort of an Unreal 2.5 kind of thing. Mm-hmm. We branched from Unreal for SWAT and for Tribes, and we had modified the heck out of the engine. And so this is our own custom version of that. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people had moved on to 3. We were on Unreal 2.5 kind of thing.
So
as long as
go for it, Alex.
Sorry,
go for it.
Brian. Well, I want to jump in and ask, as long as we're looking back, I kind of want to get a picture of where you were at this point in time working on this game. So what project had you come off of coming on design?
So, I mean, I just came off of SWAT 4, and I was a level designer on that. It was really small design team. It was three designers. We worked on that for about a year and a half, and that's where I really cut my teeth in design. You know, I had a little. Ken mentioned a game called The Lost that we worked on as a company, and we canned essentially. So I kind of cut my teeth a little bit on that, but then SWAT was where I really jumped in. So SWAT 4, and then various prototypes while we were trying to sell the next title, and frankly, a lot of people were passing on BioShock. You know, because I mean, it was you know, at the time, the sort of mix of RPG and shooter. There were a few games that had done it, you know, Deus Ex and that sort of thing, but it wasn't viewed as something that could be potentially, you know, a big success. And so, you know, we tried a bunch of different paths with BioShock, and then eventually we were able to find a partner with Take-Two, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going through Andrew Ryan's great speech, and here we go. He chose Rapture. Still looks good after all these years, even on the original version.
Yeah, it's some serious talent on this art team, man. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I just say, like, I didn't play this game when it came out. I played it sometime later. So unlike Brian, I went in with a lot of expectations, most of which were spot on and totally met. But the thing that stands out to me the most all these years later is this intro, and the first like quarter of the game especially. Yep. That really is where your wheelhouse was, I believe. So,
well, so like, this very first part, this was almost entirely art and Ken driven.
Right.
This very into the bathysphere ride, we call it, I had next to nothing to do with. I mean, I sit in reviews and that sort of thing and be like, hey guys, this is really awesome. That's not to say, I mean, like it took a while for you know, it was like Nate and Steven and Scott Sinclair and Ken and on and on. There's a whole mess of people working on this, obviously, but a lot of iterations here because, like you said, this is a crucial moment.
Yeah.
This is where the early focus test, this is what sort of made us eventually, was getting this right. This was what was missing from some of the early focus testing, getting this right.
Bill, real quick, what is your favorite part of that intro sequence and why? And this is from Daggett110 in the chat, and he also asks, do you feel it fell short anywhere?
So yeah, there's always things you could sort of tweak and you know, make, you know, improve. But I think for me the best part is where you're cresting over, or where the screen pops down and you're cresting over the hill and you get that first glimpse. I mean, for me, you can't beat that, right? It's that first, like, oh my, I believe in magic, right?
Yeah. Quick save for the folks in the chat. This is where the gameplay starts, so I will do my best to keep monitoring the chat, and we will try to answer your questions. But if I do miss them, I apologize. Alex and Chris, if you feel free to look at the chat yourselves and grab any questions.
I do have a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? I'm sorry.
I'm sure there are a few. I'm sure
a few men might be entitled. Not all men, though. I will say, while we're still not able to move, I wanted to share something, Bill, that I really think one of the things this game had in terms of what games can do, even if they're shooter RPG things. So I played this game when I was in high school, and I was taking an AP Lit class at the time. And after reading this game and reading so many articles about this game and the inspiration, the art for this game, I learned about Art Deco. I learned about a lot of the influences that went into it. I actually went to the library and checked out the very, very thick book that is Atlas Shrugged.
Cool.
And at the time, a lot of my teachers were like, why the heck are you reading this book? It's not required for class. And I was like, oh, I played this video game that made me want to read this book. And this is our first introduction to Atlas, by the way, real quick, because he told us to would you kindly grab the service radio. Sorry for anyone who hasn't played before. Spoilers may come up. But yeah, so it's a little too complicated to say what my thoughts about reading the book after that were, because it was just but it was part of, just growing up and being in college and whatever. But the fact that I went and played this game and went out and got the book that influenced the people who made it and then came to my own conclusions about the book, I think is a really powerful way that when game developers pull other art into their games, that what that can mean. So
sure.
Nice job.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, brilliant team, and Ken, that pointing out Rand and all of her amazing writing, and I think that obviously helps a lot to have that unifying vision and that piece that everyone can rally behind and understand. You would frequently point back to this, and we'll talk later on, the fact that the bathroom stalls all have little pay meters and all that sort of stuff. Most every asset would try and touch upon those key philosophies, and that's where ideas like Steinman really is objectivism personified. He's trying to perfect his craft. He's trying to be the best he can,
Yeah.
at any cost, even if it means murdering someone.
Yeah. Which is a little like fucked up. Oh damn! This is the crouch controls are like this, right? Oh no, I'm on fire.
Come on, Bryant.
You got this.
Real quick, questions from the chat. I gotta fight this guy. There are some questions in the chat. Go.
We can take care of it. Yeah. So I think I'm surprised to see a lot of people are asking Bill about what your thoughts were while designing this. Let's lay out specifically first of all what you worked on. Was it this section yet, or are we not quite there?
Sure. So yeah. So as soon as you come out of the bathysphere, all the way up through the end of medical, were the areas that and again, team effort, lots of amazingly talented people.
Absolutely.
But in terms of like where I spent most of my time, because I started off as a level designer, and eventually towards the last 8 months or a year or so, it became a lead, which meant sort of watching over more of the levels and watching over more of the content and all that. But yes, this is where I spent a lot of time. And in fact, this sequence here was one that almost killed me several times, just because getting this right. Obviously I didn't animate it or any of that, but just finding the right place to introduce plasmids, finding the right way, this whole notion of falling over the banister, all this sort of thing. It doesn't seem like a whole lot. It doesn't seem like a whole lot to come in here and you see that little locked door that you need to shock with electricity, and all of these different pieces moved around the level a million times, and so a lot of it just comes from the usual iteration that you hear so much about. And so this sequence, obviously again, besides the animation and the cutscenes and all that sort of stuff, this is where I've spent a lot of my time, and I can't even tell you how much change was in here. Good, healthy change. Where at one point I was playing around with I really wanted to make sure that frankly I didn't have all that much confidence that the audience would necessarily get the what we're trying to do, and so I sometimes I was playing around with pushing forward the combat a bunch just to make sure that we could grab people, and I think that that was one of the most hardest earned lessons that I learned from this game, was just about letting the audience lean in and trusting them, and trusting your own ability to create atmosphere. So a lot of that comes from you look at SWAT 4, and there was a really, really small project relative to what else was in the industry, and so we had to really kind of make do with very, very little. And so here, all of a sudden, as we sort of grew as a company and grew with our ambitions and all of that, trying to find ways to allow yourself to put faith in your team's abilities to create this kind of atmosphere. That was actually a challenge.
Yeah.
So I think I know it's been some years, but
sure.
If you can remember, I think it would be really helpful for maybe younger developers and students and the like to sort of understand what you mean when you talk about this almost killed me. What kind of iterations did you have to go through in designing a sequence like this? And,
sure.
And what motivated
Sure. I mean, so there's no part of this first hour and a half that wasn't slaved over for countless hours, where it was like, okay, let's try this plane sequence. This notion of a plane sequence was always there, and I shouldn't say always, but it was for as long as I can remember, it was pretty much there. The idea you take the bathysphere down and you see the tail section that you saw sink before. And it was really a matter of, okay, so when you come to the end of this hallway, for example, at one point we had it so that there was a timed pressure bit where there was something jammed in the door, and you would get the wrench here in this hallway, and you have to so you could walk by the wrench. There's an obstruction. You go back, you get the wrench, and you smash it. And so eventually you'll remember that winds up moving to the very beginning, the bathysphere room, where you find the tool chest and you find some debris and you smash it out of the way there. And so you take the same ideas, and they move around a lot. They change the sort of form and their presentation and all that. Yeah. So like this particular room right here, this is actually a sequence that Jordan and Steven added. It was really about training the 1-2 punch. That was something we realized that we needed to teach and to make, because one of the issues we found in testing was that people would sometimes use plasmids, some people would sometimes use weapons, but they wouldn't use them together, and we wouldn't find all the interesting combinations. And so we added this little sequence here to really make sure that people got the for example, the 1-2 punch. And then once we get that seed of the idea in people's heads that you can combine plasmids, I think it really took off.
Yeah.
It's constant iteration here.
Yeah. While I 1-2 punch here, go down. Thank you. There's gonna be a lot of that in this chat. We do have some questions from the chat real quick. Barolfio asks, how did level designers and artists interact? And what was that process like for this part of the game?
So it was a process that was always changing. I think early on, we took an approach where the level artists would build the level and kind of hand it off, and then we would try, like, after sort of reading over our the write-ups of the level and that sort of thing, all the design docs and all of that, or sometimes not read the docs. But there's always going to be that tension between art and design, just because there's so much overlap. But it's also that there are pieces that complement where the departments complement one another, and there are ones where they're at odds. And I think, obviously, I think, to boil it down in a really crude way, we're talking about form versus function in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And BioShock is a game where we all of the form carefully considers the function, because it's meant to be architecturally sound and believable and all of that. I think that there's always an interesting challenge of, like, okay, well, how do we make sure that there are enough interesting elements, environmental elements, for the player to use as tools and all that sort of stuff. So we create all these rules of, okay, we have to make sure we have enough oil slicks, and you have enough water to shock people in, you have enough vending machines and all of this. And that's where I think you get into a lot of tension. It's like, well, it doesn't make sense for there to be a vending machine here, but it's like, but for gameplay we need it. And so you find ways to collaborate and come together and make those things work and make them believable but also functional.
Yeah.
I remember when the game first came out, and you're kind of talking about, like, this tension between, like, theme and mechanics, kind of. I remember when it first came out and the reviews said it was great. There was some criticism about the Vita chambers. Were you involved at all in the design of the Vita chambers? I assume, like, the placement in the early levels.
Absolutely. Honestly, so in the very early design discussions, that was something that I like. It was something I've just pulled directly out of System Shock 2, or at least fought to implement. I mean, System Shock 2 had their little resurrection thingies, whatever they're called. And I thought that was a fantastic mechanic, because for me, when do you stop playing a game? It's when you get lost, or you get stuck, or you die, right? And if you have to sit through a load time, forget it. You're like, for me, and for a lot of people, I feel like that's where, and you look at a lot of the data, it shows that that's where people stop. And so we had this mechanic from System Shock 2, and this is a spiritual successor. So I was like, oh, we've got to bring this back. And there were all kinds of different versions of the Vita Chamber. Ones that deducted cash, ones that if you died within a certain time period too many times, they would shut down and you have to restart and all that sort of stuff. And ultimately, I'm happy with the decision we made, despite all the controversy when it first came out. Honestly, I think that games have kind of moved in this direction for years now, where it's just like, it used to be, if you fall in a pit in a platformer, game over, sit through a load time and try it again, right?
Yeah.
And now, like, when a lot of times you fall off a cliff, and it's like you get bamfed right back and you go. And I that's good and bad. I get why some people want the challenge, and that gets lost, and I appreciate that. But for this, I think we made the right decision.
Yeah. Quick question from the chat. Shade Kazim would like to know, when designing these first few levels, how did you consider the later half of the game and make sure these segments worked on them, even if you weren't working on the later half of the game?
Sure. So I think a lot of that is just communication. A lot of that is making sure that every designer understands the overarching goal, but also a lot of the flow. And so you create a lot of standard stuff. You create the sort of documents, like Paul Helquist, the lead designer, would go in and he would create, like, here's the sort of flow of all the weapons, and here's where they're introduced and all that sort of stuff. And that would get iterated, and sometimes we would trade in one level to the next. Like, I remember when I was working on the concepts for Fort Frolic, about going around and taking pictures of dead bodies and putting them in defacing art, essentially. I
like this part. Sorry to interrupt, but I like this part, by the way, because you get, like, a more established viewpoint of the relationship between the big daddies and the little sisters.
And this is another example where iteration was. This is another sequence that took a lot of time. In terms of presentation, the way that you walked up on the scaffolding up above, and that path that you take. Originally it was kind of like you walked around the edges of the room and that kind of thing. And, like, this room was kind of like just one that was on fire, and the shadows would kind of draw your eye from the crazy oversaturated light. And eventually I was like, well, we have, again, I was working on Fort Frolic, and I was like, oh, we have a bunch of theater assets. I'll make this into a little theory, and wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, hey, look, we're presenting something. It's a theater. Yeah. And it wound up sticking. And like, kind of pushing that more and more, and making it so you're walking across the scaffolding and all that. And again, iteration.
So there are a lot of good questions in the chat, and I want to get back to them in a minute. But something I've been wanting to ask that we haven't got around to is, you've led a strong career, since making this game.
I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, other games. And I would love to know, now that you look back with us, like what lessons did you learn on BioShock that have continued to influence the way you work as a game developer and designer?
I think, I keep saying iteration. I think that's one of the biggest ones, is that, working with Ken and the crew at Irrational, where, again, put aside the amazing talent for a second. I think one of the greatest strengths there was a willingness to listen and to admit that, we were wrong and we're not doing it right, and to change and to adapt, and like, we cared about making the best game possible, and that meant a lot of times putting aside your ego and being receptive and all of that. Again, that focus test that Ken talked about, that was heartbreaking, but we wouldn't have made this game if it weren't for that pain. And so that willingness to listen, the willingness to put faith in yourself and your team, like there are a lot of times where, like I said, there's doubt, and you just kind of have to say, okay, I know your talent, I believe in you, and we're going to make this work. But the iteration is the biggest thing.
Bill, real quick, dang it, I gotta stop drinking whiskey. Story of my life. I just wanted to. I'm gonna want to ask a question from the chat here, but I wanted to say one time I was demoing this game for a class and just trying to like call out for the other students about like the why I was making decisions the way it was, and I wanted to point out that. Could you sort of talk about how the lighting is a key component here? Because like what I love about coming in through this first part of the game is you get to see moments like you got this little, you can't see me pointing, but you got the light over here in this corner guiding you towards the real path. But back here you do have the bathroom, and the bathroom is actually an interesting like off path for this game that you frequently learn. There's goodies in there, but you like it's hidden over here. But there are some like this lighting trick over here, but the gate, but the red, like there's little ways that you're pulling the player back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, theatrical is definitely. I mean, that's definitely something we talked about a lot in this game. Is about that theatrical presentation, like in that theater scene, and here, certainly as guidance. That like lighting is I think one of your best tools you can possibly have. But yeah, it was one of the bigger challenges because it's such a noisy game, right? There's some like advertisements literally everywhere, both in the audio and the visual, and so finding that balance. And again, this is where we talk about that back and forth with art. You have to work to find, okay, this space is absolutely gorgeous, but we need the player to look over here. And so you get the eye roll, and then you come together and you figure a way to make that work. Another example, we'll look at the sort of 1984 room, we called it, with Ryan, the Ryan intro over here.
Yeah, that's coming up.
Yeah, exactly. So, finding that balance, like originally this little room over here was it was essentially just a screen. It was a black room. We're going to shut all the lights off. Black room, one of these TVs, and it wasn't reading, and it wasn't doing enough, and so we shut down all the lights. And at one point, we were supposed to really play up. You can see behind those gates there. We were supposed to have guys pounding on that, but again, we had to downplay that a bunch because people weren't looking at Ryan, right? They're always going to be attracted to motion more than something that's even no matter how monolithic Ryan is here. If you have motion, if you have noise, if you have threat, people are going to look at that, right? And so, this is a sequence where we always knew what we wanted. We wanted Ryan to come in and have this sort of godlike presence. But it kind of just became a thing where you're pushing up, cranking it up, and in some cases pulling it back because I think there are some cases where it go too far and it becomes comical.
Yeah. Your commentary is kind of going down this path towards this question that Laura 3 is asking, so I'll just go ahead and ask it. How do you use the level design to help build emotions from the player? I, for one, know that this game actually terrified me when I first played it. Ha ha.
Yeah, no, I think one of the big challenges you have there is knowing exactly what you're trying to say, and then finding ways to reinforce that throughout. I think that this particular game where there's a lot that we are saying, but I think that there are elements that tie nicely into a lot of these themes. Like there's obviously the horror elements, right? And that horror element ties nicely into like the key theme of the ideology gone wrong and the extremism and all of that. Like I think obviously it's a dystopia, right? And so I think
it was. It's just a dystopia. I think Rapture's lovely.
Don't tell anyone. So I think it's about consistency and establishing what you're trying to say early on, and then trying to find ways to reinforce that in the broad strokes and the tiny little strokes as well. And so I think if you have a good theme right off the bat, you'd look for those opportunities, and I think it's really just a lot of work.
Yeah. We're doing one of these little puzzles now. I was gonna say I was actually taking a moment there just to
Sure.
I was just taking a moment to look at the start of this level, and again, just pointing out, especially because we have a lot of students in the class, how this little secret can get you something like this, but like looking at how they just laid out this level and all these little things that point you in that direction. But then
Yes.
I'm more experienced with this game, so like I have this like hidden itch to like look behind me and look to the, kind of behind and left a lot, or behind and
Yeah.
right, depending which way I entered. But like that's what this level layout is kind of pointing
Which
towards
is
right now.
And that is a very good point. And this actually, if you want to go back for a second,
Sure
this is a tough lesson that I found in my career for less so for myself because I grew up playing Zelda, but a lot of designers have trouble with this. That too often when designers create sequences, they often present the player with the solution before the problem. And so in this particular case, it's nothing groundbreaking here, but up that where you're being pulled to, if you want to go to the right, yeah, like up there, the point is that you're going to go to that room behind you there for the key, essentially, for the way to shut down the power and open up these gates over here.
Yeah.
And so we did want you to pull forward.
Yeah, like up
despite
to
the
here.
fact that it's a dead end, and it feels like, oh, why would I go to the dead end? Well, that's exactly it, because that way you appreciate the solution more. And this
Yeah.
is just a goofy little locked door, right?
Yeah.
But so often, and I see this in shipped games all the time, you come into a room and you're drawn to like, oh, look at this, I found a key or something, other, I don't know, a fire extinguisher or whatever. And then you go down the hall and it's like, oh, and there's the fire I'm supposed to put out. You would be surprised, or maybe not, how many people have difficulty grasping. You have to make sure that you're pulling people towards the blockage before the solution. It sounds so
that
obvious,
is a
but-
really good observation, one I hadn't thought of yet. For
well,
playing this game.
it's one of those things where it's sometimes it comes naturally, but when you think about it, you got to work for it.
Yeah.
I can show you another example up top here where in this particular room, I actually sort of redid the layout based on some of this feedback that Ken had.
up
So
here?
quarantine control. Yeah, like basically, I'll let you finish these people off here.
Yeah.
So if you look right here, this is your blockage. This is where you're trying to get to. Right,
Yeah.
right there. Whoops, sorry. Make
It's all
sure you don't
good.
get
It's all
the
good. keep talking, by the way. I'll handle them.
Okay, cool.
Being a little droid here.
So,
What up, buddy?
originally I had the solution, the little lever here, was pretty much like right up against the wall or whatever. So you couldn't actually appreciate when you actually pull the switch, and then the room lights up red, and then you see eventually when you do get the solution, Steinman's key, you see the door open up and all that sort of stuff. So you look at how contrived this section is. Like you come up here and you have this little island platform overlooking both the door and then oh, look at that! You just found a little secret there, I think.
Oh, what? Over here?
Well, actually, you were walking up the side. I didn't know you could do that.
Nice.
We should put a blogging volume there. Stop breaking the game. So yeah, you can see where like this is a little bit contrived, right? But I think that's exactly the way you present these sort of things. Is you find ways to put the things in front and center, and that can be difficult when you're talking about pushing a button.
Oh,
right?
nice. Well, I was going to point out this room here is actually interesting, too.
Yep.
Like, oh, look, the Tommy gun. Oh, no, a trap.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is a very similar layout here where you can see the solution up ahead, and you're going to use the switch. I mean, it's basically a mirror of that other room.
Yeah.
You use that switch, and then you can see the door open up and all the enemies flood in and all of that.
Yeah. Trying not to die here, but there are some questions in the chat. Text Knight is asking sort of a little bit. This might not have been your department, but like, can you talk about the audio diaries a little bit? Maybe a little bit about their placement or the balancing their audio, like, and their essentialness to what was going on with like not getting drowned out by these splicers right here.
So that was the placement. Generally speaking, there was a lot of conversations that designers would have with Ken, but the actual writing and the sort of like obviously the arc and all that was almost entirely Ken and whoever he had helping him with the writing.
Yeah.
But in terms of the placement, what happened is we would get the recordings, and the designers would go in and place all of the logs and get a pass and sort of like have several reviews with Ken and that sort of thing. And in a lot of cases, where they didn't work, he would tell you where to move them around and all that sort of thing. And you'd have these almost like negotiations where it's like, okay, Ken's like, I really, this log should go right here. And you'd be like, well, yeah, but I'm having this little ambush here, or I have this little pickup, and you sort of have this back and forth. And so it's just this sort of natural ebb and flow of design. And this is why having, I think, your writer on site is so critical. I mean, so often I feel like writing in games is kind of kicked over the wall from the writer, and then it's like, yeah, but that's not how the level works that we're building, and you have to go back and change everything. And maybe that works fine for some teams, but I think the healthiest ones are the ones where you have these discussions and debates, and because you're only going to make it 10 times better.
Yeah.
So to be clear, you're talking about having the writers in-house and integrated with the design team rather than
when possible.
contract
Yeah.
writers. Yeah.
So yes. So I know there's a lot of times where your writers are off-site even, or not even part of the team or whatever. And
Right.
as long as you can get them in the same room, the more time I think the better. But as long as you get them in the same room, occasionally, you can work these sort of things out and make it a lot better.
I think
So
there's
you
a real hunger for wanting to know like more about the production process. So, for example, you mentioned you focus mostly on these early levels. Like, how did you work with the rest of the team to make sure they flowed well with the later levels, and there was a through line of both design and narrative?
Yeah, that was something that I as production went on, I started to get more and more involved in sort of the overlooking of things and sort of coordination and the management and leadership stuff. So working with Paul, working with Ken to make sure that there's cohesion, making sure that things are gelling, and that again, where if you have a problem in one level, it becomes like dominoes, or I shouldn't say dominoes, but these sort of, if there are pieces that aren't gelling, things fall apart, right? And so you have to make sure there's cohesion. And so, there's just a lot of reviews. What we wound up doing eventually towards the last, 8 months or a year or 8 months or so of the project, and sort of it became, the frequency increased considerably. Towards the end of the game, we were having like, any level, we'd sit down, Ken, myself, Paul would sit down with the designer on the level and the level builder on the level, and we would do a review like twice a week, sometimes more, and just do a playthrough. And we'd just give notes, be like, "Oh, you should move this thing over here, and this ambush isn't working." And why did you choose this? What was the thinking behind this design decision, and that kind of thing, and just hashing it out and really trying to make it a million times better.
Yeah.
Was there a specific point in the game, in the game's development, where it went from holy crap, I don't know if like this is going to work, to
Sure.
something clicking and being like, okay, we're going to be all right now?
I can specifically remember. I don't know the date, but I mean, I want to say it was, and this is scary, but I want to say it was probably 3 or 4 months before ship. And mind you, you still have a month or so between when you're done and when the game ships, right? There's the gold master and the waiting for approval and all that sort of stuff. So it's about, I want to say probably 2, maybe 3 months before. Where I remember leaving a review in the back room with Ken, and I remember what level it was actually, and just walking out of the room and being like, this is a lot of fun. Like specifically, Ken saying like, I've seen the promise of fun, and I've seen the systems that are feeling good, but this is the first time where things really felt like they were there and they were together, and this is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be special.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's probably around 3 months before. But there were obviously a lot of glimmers before that. There was a lot of demos we put together. Our E3, where like we can see that, oh my God, this can be awesome, and we have the tools, and we can make it happen. But there's always so much apprehension, right? There's so much like, well, what if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? All that sort of thing. But ultimately, really, what I was really confident, specifically about 3 months before, during that review.
You say that that's scary, but I don't think that that's uncommon, even like with these big production like games. I think that it was a documentary that Naughty Dog put out about Last of Us, and and it was kind of a similar deal where just like alarmingly close to the end, there's this like collective realization among the team, and don't quote me on this, I'm just kind of going by memory here, but that it really felt like everything finally came together. All their work that they've been doing came together, and it did. So I don't think that's terribly uncommon for a dev team to happen.
I was just going to add up for the audience real quick. Sorry, there's a phone ringing. I do apologize. So I was going to point out for the audience that this is the part of the game where things begin to first open up a bit. Like I'm wandering through like some side section right now instead of following the arrow. So you were Medical Pavilion. This is one of your big ones. Can you sort of talk about opening up the game like this?
Yeah, that is something that we played around with a bunch, and you're always worried about if it's too late, too soon, all that sort of stuff. You want to make sure. I mean, this is a complicated game in terms of, it's very heady, very cerebral, and so we were constantly playing around with like, okay, how many, where the gates are, where the locks are, all that sort of stuff, and where to open up. Here's another example. This this room here where we introduced the incinerate plasmid.
Yeah.
Again, so this is an example of where the openness does sort of prevent you a bit potentially from one of the things I was just talking about introducing the blockage before the solution.
Yeah.
So there are 2 ice blocks up until this point, and you could theoretically miss both of them.
I did. I didn't hit those ice blocks on this playthrough.
Right, exactly, yeah. And so to some degree that can be okay because it's a bit of a soft blockage, and it's also one where like you're getting a really cool tool, so it's not like a key or something like this. But when actually this particular sequence here at one point, Ken said to the design team, is like, hey, we have all these really cool tools and we're not really introducing them. Let's introduce our damn plasmas and that kind of thing. And so this was a little sequence that I came up with here just about, and it's a goofy little sequence, but you see that the light pulls you into the little crawl space here that leads into the display where you've got this guy has his own little personal incinerate plasma. I mean, it's in a
morgue.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it kind of makes sense fictionally, but so you go in, and then I just obviously the guy send the splicers in, start pounding on the door, and this is an example where a lot of times these kind of introduction sequences, they can be a little goofy and they can be, breakable because technically you don't have to light that oil on fire. Even you could just kind of climb out there and get shellacked by all these guys, and you can sort of abstain from the tutorial. But ultimately, most people tend to obey, to sort of play along because they want to see what the content is.
Because someone said, "Would you kindly?"
Nice.
Questions from the chat. Gemstrike would like to know how much paper mapping was done before the 3D work you did on the game.
Not a ton, honestly. So there was some, and I like for the Fort Frolic layout. There were pieces that changed quite a bit, but the broad strokes of the sort of central atrium, and then the 2 main hallways that split off of that didn't really change all that much. But there were entire levels that I don't think ever wound up on paper. They may have just been like on a whiteboard where Ken was like, okay, so this is and I'm not to single out like the sub bay level, for example, but that was mostly a narrative level, and Ken was like, okay, so we need this flow. We're going to come down here. I'm going to play audio here where Atlas is talking about, or Fontaine's talking about this and that and the other thing, and then you come down in this sub bay, you get locked in, and so it all depended. Medical. We had some early sketches, and I think the more we got into it, the more iteration we did. It was like, well, okay, this is kind of pointless. All of our sketches are entirely moot, and the game went through so many changes that I think it's a good way to get started in a game like this. But I think you can't be a slave to those drawings, and so somehow I think Fort Frolic was really the only level that the broad level layout really didn't change. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that's partly because it was a very flexible design in the sense that it's about explore the level openly, find 4 things to take to murder and take pictures of, and then head back to the central atrium, the hub, and sort of upload the photo. Because that premise stayed the same, like the general flow of the level didn't need to change. Plus, it helped that was actually one of our first like E3 demos. I think that was our announcement demo. We had one of the halls from that level, and so that obviously helps solidify things. And once you've built something that's beautiful and been shown, I think you're less likely to change it.
Yeah,
I have to admit, like something. It's a small thing, but it's been on my mind for years, and I see in the chat that it's on some other students' minds as well. Cool. What's the deal with ghosts?
Yeah.
What's up with the ghosts?
That is a good question. So part of it is that they were a good tool to exposit, right? They're a good tool for narrative, but I think it's also BioShock in a lot of ways, because it's the spiritual successor to System Shock 2. There were a lot of times where we kind of had these assumptions of like, System Shock had these things, we should have these. Is there any reason we shouldn't have these? Right. And like again, there's you look at the ghost at the beginning of this level where Steinman, she's pounding on the door where the door is locked, and she's calling up to Steinman to let her in, and that whole thing. There are plenty of ways we could have got that information across, but I think it's important to not underestimate the use of contrast. If it were a log or something like that, like there are a lot of logs, and so that diversity of information I think gets you a long way. And so I think it was a different way to exposit the information. It's in a lot of ways more compelling in the sense that it's a visual piece that doesn't require a ton. Like you bear in mind that this was a very small team, And so you'll notice that they all use the same mesh, like the same skeleton and all of that, and that's because to rig all of that would have been a lot of time and money, and it's something we didn't want to take on because it wasn't crucial. But anyway, so yeah, it's a mix of things, but I think you always want to look for different ways to exposit.
Can you talk about this little thing right here, this little tutorial for tennis balls?
When Ken first pitched, this is something that Ken first pitched.
He pitched it.
Yeah, we were, because we were talking about training and like so I went off and created the Incinerate one, and then he had this idea. He's like, okay, we have telekinesis, we need to make sure people use it. It's a little bit more difficult to get, and he's always looking for ways, and I think this is important to ground things, to give things not only weight but add in the human element. And so we could have done a million things with telekinesis, but the idea of a tennis-loving doctor or dentist, right, who has this little tennis ball machine in the back, and he uses telekinesis to catch things. Obviously, you don't need to catch things with telekinesis with tennis, but so he said, oh yeah, there's a little button, and we'll rework one of the turrets and make it so that it spits out tennis balls. And again, small, thrifty team trying to figure out how to get the most bang for your buck. So Paul redid the tennis ball machine, and then we placed the telekinesis there. And then there's also little bits. I'm sure you noticed when you came out of that space. I spawn a splicer who comes by, and I happen to put a gas canister that's there, and so I give it a little nudge with physics just in case you were like you miss it. So again, we're putting you at a choke point where you're facing directly where you have the goodie, right? Mm-hmm. You couldn't have seen it when you came in unless you happened to turn around. I spawn a splicer, have it walk past, give it fictional justification for knocking over, and then you're like, oh shoot, here's a splicer, and it's like, oh, I just got telekinesis. Oh, let me grab this thing. Oh, telekinesis is so much fun, right? So you start off with a mundane thing like tennis, and then before you know it, you're throwing, nukes, right? And so that stuff's fun.
Speaking of telekinesis, here we go.
Yeah. Has your work as a level designer changed the way you see the real world?
Absolutely. I think at the very least, looking at architecture, but also there's a certain set of logic that you begin to follow, and a certain sense of presentation that you have with things. And so whether I'm eating at a restaurant or whether I'm looking at the UX of some software, or it's everywhere. I think that you look at the world as a way to present things, and just how much better things would be if people took the time to present things like a level designer does. That stuff's crucial. It's really difficult to get right, but I think more importantly, a lot of people don't even give it the time. It's like, okay, I'm creating, I don't know, like I'm doing a 5-course meal, right? And or this terrible example, I guess. I'm trying to think of. Everyone always points to Disney World, right?
Yeah.
Everyone always points to theme parks about the way that those information is presented there, and the way that people are guided, and the way that you give subtle hints visually and through the audio space and through all these different methods to guide people. You look at things like airports, you look at the security lines and all that sort of stuff, and it's like people have thought these things through, but I don't know that they're really critiquing their work like they like a level designer would, right?
A while back,
so it's everywhere.
I was interviewing his name escapes me, but he was the creative director at Machine Games, working on the new Wolfenstein. Yeah. And he had mentioned that he's into architecture. I can't remember if he was like actually designing like a physical building or something. And I asked him, like, does your experience like with game design and level design influence like how you're going to be designing this real life thing? And he was just like, no. If I was designing a grocery store, then the level design would come in handy. For that, just because of the way that it directs you. The milk is in the back. Right. There's that analogy, like the milk is in the back, so you have to walk past everything. Yep. So I don't know. That's my level design anecdote.
No, it's very
it's a real life anecdote. Yeah.
It's great. And honestly, there are some great articles on Trader Joe's and the way that they design everything about the Trader Joe's experience is designed, and like right down to the fact that they this is sort of very counter to level design, but they actually purposely pick really tight areas with small parking lots because they want to create a hive sort of feel. They want it to feel like it's swarming. They want it to feel like, oh, what's going on in there? I want to be, part of that. And the way that they talk about constantly stalking, where they don't have stalk people overnight, the way that they make it into a very interesting interactive social experience, and the way that the rows are angled. That's all very thought out, and
like IKEA is the first time I was in an IKEA, I was like, "There's this. I have to go this way." I mean, it's like IKEA is like video game level design from like the mid '90s or something. Like,
it's like a Doom level.
super. Yeah, it's a corridor.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Shopping experience.
It's funny. Actually, Irrational's old office space in Quincy, Mass. It was designed. I won't say who, but it was designed by one of our level creators, and it felt like it because there was a lot of you open up a door and there'd be a pillar right in front of the door, and you have to walk. It was just what the hell? You were a much better builder than this. What the hell happened?
Yeah, so maybe your video game skills don't always correlate directly to real life, but sometimes.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know, Bill, did you ever have any interest in going to other design professions like an architect or a chef, or was it always video games?
Absolutely. So in college, I mean, I didn't really have I didn't want to do this forever, but I always love any kind of design. But so in college, I was a film major, and so obviously very interested in story and storytelling. But I've always had an appreciation for any kind of design, and in college, I was a landscape designer. We did all kinds of really interesting beds, designed all kinds of beds, and I've always had a bit of a green thumb, and I loved that. But honestly, I always have an appreciation for anything that's designed, anything that's crafted, and it's just something I'm always passionate about. And I get, all my friends kind of give me a lot of flack because I'm always being hypercritical of things. They were just talking about the airport lines and all that sort of thing, and it's just if you did it this way, it'd be better. I have some sort of expertise in anything, right? Usually, there's a lot of smart people, or smart people have put a lot of thought into something, and it's just you can't control. I mean, this sequence here, for example, there are probably ways that you can break this that I'm not aware of, and
we almost broke it just there because he wasn't throwing the bombs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had to go shoot him and go. Hey, I'm here.
I'm gonna say no, that didn't happen. That was perfect.
Yep. Who do we email for fixes?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Ken. I'm sure he'd love that.
He wants to hear about that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's his favorite thing. So yeah, I mean, I just love it. Actually, quick aside. I encourage every designer to watch. There's a film called Objectified. It's a documentary. If anyone has heard, have anyone heard of this?
I think I watched that a couple years ago. It was on Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It is on Netflix, I believe, still, and it's just all about. They talk about all kinds of industrial designers in various industries. They talk to people from Apple, talk to people from Target and IKEA.
Is that the one they talked to the guy from IDEO, right? Who made that first laptop? Is that the same documentary? Maybe I'm making.
I don't know if they. I don't remember a laptop. Hold on. Do you remember them talking to I forget his name, from Apple, one of the head designers at Apple?
I think so. Yeah, and there's someone who made a chair. I don't know. Whatever.
Yes.
There was a series of 3 documentaries. One was Objectified, one's on topography, and one's on something else, and they're all really good.
There's also Helvetica, which is a great documentary as well, just talking about fonts.
Yeah.
But yeah, listen, any field where, I mean, this is really every field, but any field where there's a lot of seemingly needless thought given into something small, and people have become expert in. I'm usually really interested in that, just to realize how little I know about something, and to it's something really comforting about people immersing themselves in stuff that you've maybe given a cursory thought, right? Pardon me a second.
No worries.
Didn't realize my phone. Sorry about that.
I used to feel silly about
what's that?
I used to feel silly about digging into the nuts and bolts of design, whether it's game design or chair design. But really, what I think when you do that, you come to have a greater appreciation of human intelligence and sort of our own impact on the world and how we see it, because we unconsciously and consciously shape everything we touch, and this is a really clear way to study that and to break it apart.
Yeah.
I like the way you think.
That is a very nice way to think about that. Question from the chat. Carly would like to know the pointing, navigating arrows. I know that's another one of the big controversies of BioShock, if you will, from a design perspective. Sort of when did they come in, and were they a reactionary thing? Were they a proactive thing? Can you sort of talk about it?
It was honestly a relatively late thing. I want to say it was probably last 6 or 8 months. I don't remember exactly where. And it was controversial within the team, primarily because it's you look at the game and it's all about like there's a lot of freeform exploration and like letting the player sort of decide. It's about expressing themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but at the same time, people are getting lost. There's no question that a game. It's not a huge game. The medical pavilion, for example, it doesn't. It's not Oblivion. It's not Skyrim, but at the same time, I think there's enough nooks and crannies, and the fact that it's difficult to really have large landmarks. Like you look at Halo, you play a Halo game, right? And it's like, oh, okay, I can see the actual Halo. I'm either heading that direction or that direction. Whereas this, you could be heading in any direction. It's very maze-like, right? And so in a lot of the tests, we found that people were getting distracted and lost and all that sort of thing, and frankly, more importantly, frustrated. And so one of the things that Ken was always a big fan of is like if there's an opportunity to provide an option, that's low-hanging fruit, right? It may frustrate some, but ultimately, if you can shut it off, does it matter? Does it? I think as long as it's clear that that's not something that people are obligated to take part in, I think that's fine. I think that's usually the best approach is to make sure that people have the smoothest experience, and to people who feel like it's being overbearing or condescending to them or whatever you want to say, they can shut it off and have which is why we actually eventually we patched in the notion to go back to the Vita chambers. We made it so that you could shut them off, right? And so I think it's important to be receptive to feedback and like frankly, is he going to heal himself?
Oh, he did. Oh no. That's the first time that ever happened to me.
Bryant.
You were in trouble. That was actually something that was we almost cut that the notion of
good. He ran into my turn,
splicers healing themselves because we felt like there was still a bit of work left to be done to make that work and to make that read. And it was a question of like, is anyone even noticing it happening? Is there anything that we can do to make it so that it's more likely that people see it? Because ultimately, if people don't even know it's happening, what's the point of the feature, right? If it's all under the hood. And so I think we did some stuff where we made it so that we extended the time it takes for them to heal. We made it so that they're a little bit louder when they're healing and all that sort of stuff. And you exaggerate these things and put your thumb on the scale because there's nothing more heroic than like, oh no, he's running off to the healing station and he's healing himself. Oh my god! And you just managed to finish him off.
In that case, just missed.
It's a great moment, right?
Just missed, kind of the. But no, yeah,
miss it.
Yeah. Let's see.
We've got about 2 minutes here.
Only 2 minutes.
Only 2 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, we've done an hour.
I mean,
this has been really good. I think that we should fit in also before we part here. I mean, is there anything else like you wanna add here before we take off here, Bill?
Other than I could go on forever, so I really appreciate this, and like I said, I could talk forever. But the most important thing for anyone who's interested in design is to get out there and ask these kind of questions, and to get out there and study these things, as Alex said, and to understand the way of thinking. And you can have a great gut, but I think most importantly of all is to have a strong analytical mind and someone who's willing to question things, question yourself, question your team, question everything, and just be committed to making the best work possible.
That is great advice. And Bill is on Twitter, and people should follow him at
Game On Gardner or the Deep End Games.
And we're going to put that
again, just for the audience.
Oh, so that's Game On Gardner.
Or what game are you working on right now?
Oh, sorry, Perception. Perception is the name of the game.
Sweet.
Probably don't have a release date yet, but if you keep on a look at our website or Twitter account and all of that.
What's your studio again?
The Deep End Games.
Yeah,
so it's thedeependgames.com. With any students out there, I'm happy to, if you want to tweet at me or whatever, I'm happy to answer any questions. I love talking to students. I love curious people. I love people who want to make better games, and I'm happy to help if I can. I'm usually very busy, but I usually make it a point to take time out to talk to folks. And because listen, real quick, sorry, Ken Levine, the creative director of BioShock and at Irrational Games, he gave me a shot. He actually found me at GameStop. I was working at Electronics Boutique, and I was deciding.
I'm
to
also an alumnus of.
Nice. I was deciding to go from film to games, and so I took up my old college job, and I met him there, and he was lucky enough to offer me a QA position, and I haven't looked back since.
He was
so
lucky enough? I mean, maybe
I was
he
trying
was
to
lucky
pay
enough.
forward.
Sorry, just playing what you said. Yeah, cool. That's really cool. Oh, whoa. Yeah.
Flashbacks.
So well, Bill, thanks for joining us, and everybody in chat, thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, thank
make
you.
sure
This was a lot of fun.
make sure to follow us on Twitch. We're kind of still spooling this up. We don't even have a name for it yet. But go ahead and follow us. We're going to be posting an archive on Gamasutra.com. I think you may all know where that is. And I am Chris Graft, editor-in-chief of Gamasutra. There's also
I'm Alex, editor of Gamasutra.
Make sure you point it to Helga, the polar bear.
Oh my goodness.
And I am Brian Francis, contributing editor to Gamasutra. I will be getting this video up as soon as I can this afternoon for you all to watch. Thanks so much.
all right. Thanks.
One moment.
Cheers, y'all.